Chavez Jr., but the fighter of the weekend was Floyd Schofield Jr., Kid Austin. And I gotta talk my shit just real quick to get us started because back in February, I was one of the few people giving Kid Austin a shot against Shakur Stevenson. I wasn't picking him, but I gave him a real chance to beat Stevenson and kind of make up for that gap in skill and timing with speed and athleticism and punching power and the balls to go for it in his fights. And I feel validated now after what he did to Tevin Farmer. I picked him to beat Tevin Farmer, but I didn't think he was going to do that. And for Farmer to go 10 rounds with Raymond Murataya last year, and I covered that fight, and it was nip and tuck. He barely lost to Murataya. Murataya now is IBF lightweight champion since that fight. And for him to go 24 rounds with William Zepeda and not go anywhere, knock Zepeda down in their first fight, and for Kid Austin to take him out in 80 seconds, fresh off of fighting two of the top five lightweights, is the definition of a statement. And I think Kid Austin was a little bit underrated as a young fighter because he gets it done in a different style with his athleticism than your Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, Tank Davis, Abdullah Mason, Keyshawn Davis. These guys are more, sharpshooters. And I say that, and Kid Austin was a sharpshooter in round one because he placed the jab, swept the right hand, turned that punch over beautifully against the southpaw. And then he landed his real home run shot when Farmer got up from the first knockdown, and that's the left hook. And he landed it because he exploded with combinations like a finisher. And Keyshawn can do that, and these other guys can do that too, but they're more sharpshooters, and he's more Raheem, who he reminds me more of. A lot of people compare him to Sean Porter. He reminds me of Shane Mosley a little bit, and I mean, I'm not saying he's the next Sugar Shane Mosley, okay? Shane Mosley, one of the great fighters of the last 30 years, but Jack Mosley used to call it power boxing. Remember that, Raheem? This kid kind of does that. He fights off his athleticism. He could switch. He takes interesting angles with his foot speed, and he's explosive, and he's got the balls to jump in, kind of like Pacquiao would jump in. And he's one of these guys fighting off his athleticism, but there's a method to it. And that sweeping right hand off the jab, that shows he's growing, in his craft. And so I think he's an exciting player at lightweight. I thought that back in February, but he proved it last night, knocking out Tevin Farmer. What do you think about him, Raheem?
Last night, you're not going to get a lot of analysis, X's and O's, because it's 80 seconds of blistering, demolishing, power punching effectiveness in a knockout that I couldn't find a punch that landed on Schofield. Like literally, this guy went in there, landed everything he threw, knocked out Tevin Farmer with a picture perfect performance. What I took away from it, setting the skill aside and whatever punch he landed with the hook, the right hand, it doesn't matter. What you saw in there was somebody who internalized all of the shit talking that he had to endure when he dropped out of that
Shakur fight.
Shakur Stevenson fight.
Yep.
I was there. I did the last interview with him.
You did.
Before he dropped out. And then I had to ask Frank Warren had to ask everybody about it because, to be fair, what was happening on social media after he dropped out of the fight was wild. I'm not here to say it was true or untrue, a hoax or a real, or if this hospital bed video is authentic or something just to create a conversation that would excuse him from having to fight
Shakur Stevenson.
Shakur Stevenson. Now, I'm being a bit of a dick. I love Shakur. Of course, I can remember Shakur, but this is the kind of performance that makes you forget guys.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay.
It's the kind of performance that makes you talk about Scofield and not Shakur, not Tank. And Tank, listen, has stepped up to the plate many times and had that kind of action. What I'm saying is tonight, or last night and today, this guy, Schofield, is all we're talking about. The guy who also fought on the same night was just out in front of 50 million people on Netflix in his last fight. Nobody's talking about him today. The guy who fought last night is a former world champion. Nobody's talking about him today. Tevin Farmer, like you said, just came through excellent competition.
Mm-hmm.
While not being successful at every stage, he made a hell of a performance and was a better known fighter with a much better track record. And you didn't pick him, but a lot of people did.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I saw it
He
all
just,
over Twitter heading into the fight. That was the sexy boxing intelligentsia pick.
he's just a footnote today. Kid Austin Schofield is the only guy, the only name we remember today. And I heard one of the commentators, say, "You see that, Shakur? You paying attention, Tank?" I thought that was a bit cheeky. You know why? Because at that moment, I didn't want to hear anybody else's name.
Mm.
That was Schofield's moment. It wasn't even about Tank. It wasn't about Shakur. It was about what this man came to say to the world, and that's, "I'm here. It's real, and look out, because I'm coming for whoever they put in my way." That is what I got from last night. That is the guy that I was talking to in the interview before he dropped out of the fight. I
Raheem,
was impressed.
being around him, this he struck me about the. I covered him twice in Vegas at the what used to be the Hard Rock. Anyway, when I got around him in person, you tell me if you agree with this. I got that aura, that sense of youthful promise that this kid's going somewhere. Like you feel it in his energy when you're around him. He's a good young man. Yeah, a lot of people don't like the dad and all that, and I do think Senior is a nice guy. When you talk about, I do think Junior has to grow his wings and fully become his own man and the boss in that camp. But I got the sense whenever I was around him as a prospect, there's something to this kid. He's got a little bit of that youthful promise to him. He's going somewhere.
When I interviewed him, his father wasn't in the interview, and it wasn't orchestrated that way. I didn't
Right,
ask for him to do the interview alone. I just grabbed him. Pop wasn't there.
right.
And if I'm honest, I didn't know Pop being in the interview was a major thing. It was the first time I ever interviewed the kid. He was very gracious. He was like, it was a moment for him that I was interviewing him, which was a humbling moment for me that he even thought of this interview that way.
Right.
And then he did in that interview what he did in the ring last night. Nailed it. I mean, he was well spoken. He was thoughtful. He, challenging to Shakur, but not ignorant. He sounded like somebody who had his plan set, knew exactly what he came to do, and was planning to do exactly what he said. I enjoyed the conversation, and I was looking forward to the fight much more after the interview than before. That's the best you can ask for from a fighter. So I was disappointed when this fight didn't happen, and also a bit taken aback when I saw so many comments about how the father wasn't there and how much better he was in the interview without the dad, and he needs to be out on his own more. And then we saw this chicanery from the hospital. Even if the injury was real or whatever the fuck they said it was, the way that they put that on socials and the way it was handled still was fucking ridiculous. So I'm not saying whether or not he was ill or not, but I am saying that I do think the father probably orchestrated that kind of public presentation of whatever it was, and that kind of meddling, that kind of um, control over your son is something that a fighter and a father go through
Yeah.
when you are shepherded to the big stage by a father who is protecting you and managing you as an immature young kid and your father knows what's possible. He sees the talent in you. He's probably had to pull you back from distraction many times. And then there comes a point when he's done a good job and you can start to take the reins. You can start to at least put one of your hands on the wheel. You can start working the gear shift and moving your own vehicle
Because I don't
without
think people
having to be
realize when they see
training wheels.
these dads that they feel are so overbearing, and they are overbearing, but you got to understand they're carrying their kids to the finish line before they become men. I've seen it in the gym with father-son combos. The son on a lot of those days doesn't want to work, doesn't feel like putting that extra mile in the gym, and the dad gets on their ass and gets on their ass. And so people got to understand that's part of why they are the nature they are. Because if you let a 16-year-old just do what he does and don't stay on his ass, he's probably not going to get to that finish line they have in mind when he's a grown man. But the thing is, at a certain point, the young man's got it.
Yeah, and that transition is not overnight. Like I
right,
said,
right,
one hand on the wheel, not both.
right, right,
Yeah, maybe you're
right,
working the
right.
gear shift, but the clutch and the gas is still pops. Like you can gradually move into this space. And what I believe happened behind closed doors, and this is entirely just what I believe, that the way that rollout of his illness and him pulling out of the fight and the negative response that he got to that, and then the apology to Turkey and all this shit, I don't think Schofield Jr. was in control of all that. I think he was embarrassed by that. I think it didn't reflect who he is. And this statement last night was saying to the world who he is. I think that's the moment where he puts both hands on the wheel because he doesn't like how he's being presented. That doesn't mean his father is doing a bad thing or he's a bad guy. It's
Right.
just time to let a man be a man. And this boy became a man last night.
Yeah, that was the statement. That's a good way to put it. And I would say the young man showed everyone who thought he was a pretender that he's a contender. That's
That's
what he proved last night. And what you saw him crying on the top rope, that was that, like you said, that emotion from all the shit he's had to hear over the last couple months. And
Yeah, man. That's coming out of the cocoon. That's the, you know what I mean? That's pulling Excalibur out of the stone. Like those tears, and I'm not a big guy about, I don't love crying at work, but those to me were tears of a warrior. It wasn't blubbering. You know what I mean? Like
right,
that was that emotion getting to the top of your throat right there.
right.
That is something that I have no issue with because you did the business. You're not in there crying because you didn't step up. And so, yeah, man, he deserves that. I love that for him. And it must be said, Tevin Farmer is no lay down Sally or slouch. It wasn't his
No,
night. He came in and wasn't ready for the train that was headed down the tracks his direction. I think he got hit cold and he
he got
didn't
caught cold.
recover. And yeah, it's exactly what happened. And he got
Mhm.
up and Kid Austin did not give him a chance to recover. And he met Man Schofield. That's what I'm about to start calling Kid Austin, Man
Man
Schofield.
Schofield, man Austin. Yeah.
Yeah.
He styles make fights against fighters that don't have that level of athleticism, and then more so in Murataya's case, that level of aggression, right? And so Farmer was able to do his slick thing and all that, but against this kid who had that level of speed and athleticism, caught him in the first round and didn't recover. I do think like you're saying, you don't really want to hear about other guys right now. It's about Kid Austin, but I do think in a way he definitely took some of the luster off of Shakur's fight with Zepeda. For Zepeda, this ain't a good look to go 24 and you hit Farmer with everything to the body, to the head. You fought downhill on him for several rounds and couldn't do nothing with him ultimately. For that kid to go in there and blast it. But to be fair to Zepeda, Raheem, he might
Mhm.
have softened up Farmer over 24 rounds for Kid Austin. A little bit,
A little
but
bit. A
a
little
little
bit.
bit, a little bit. 24 fucking rounds he went with the guy. You get them softened
I
up a
only
little.
do that to make you do it.
Yeah, a a little bit. So but so then that leaves us with and I
No,
still think yeah,
go ahead. I mean, well, okay. To your point, yes, last night was not the day to talk about these other guys. And yes, at the beginning of this conversation, I had a little bit of fun with it in the sense that, really, this is the guy that's worth talking about for the rest of the day. But we're into the evening here, as I am across the
right.
pond and in on British soil, much closer to where these next fights might take place. And I believe that what you saw last night from Kid Austin becoming man Schofield is what we expected to see from Devin Haney in Times Square. What needed to be said for a different reason by Schofield last night is what Haney needed to say to us in Times Square, which is why the performance he put on and the way he put it on, and for the reasons I have previously stated, which is why I understand what he did, I think also rang so hollow for so many people because that thing inside you that needs the world to know who you are, the reason you step through those ropes and put your life on the line and take those punishing punches and do all that training and shit, the shit that most people don't have inside them. It's about me saying to the world, I'm different. I'm a guy who is somebody you cannot be. And I'm not going to let an inch go without making that statement every foot of the way forward. And when Haney got an opportunity to do that, to make that statement, he chose to evade that moment and just be a skillful point scoring 12 round fighter. And that's counterintuitive to what you believe a Warrior's mindset to be, to everything that he had to hear before he got in that ring. I'm talking Haney now. Everything that he had to go through, all the memes and barbs and all the Garcia shit talking, everything. Can you imagine if on that day and that night, Devin Haney would have done what Schofield did last night? Can you imagine? That's the thing.
And you don't, I'm assuming you don't literally mean a first round knockout, right?
No, I mean, I do literally mean a first round knockout because a first round knockout is what we got last night. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I mean. Something that is undeniable, something that is almost a perfect performance, something that is so spiteful, so perfect, so vicious, so much of a statement that it can not be denied. Yeah, something that erases everybody else's name in the past in 80 seconds. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean.